Welcome back to English Story Haven, the place where every tale carries wonder, mystery, and a lesson to guide us all. Today's story is called The Silent Kingdom, a tale of shadows and light. Let's step into a world where silence itself holds power, and where one voice may change everything. The kingdom was drowned in silence, not the peaceful kind found in quiet libraries or gentle forests, but a heavy, suffocating hush that made every heartbeat sound too loud. Elara paused, just inside the ancient stone gate, her boots echoing in the deserted market square. Abandoned stalls leaned like tired old men, fruit rotted in baskets, left behind as though their owners had fled in haste. Not even a bird dared to sing. Elara was a traveler, but no warrior. She carried no sword, only a satchel of parchment and a voice trained to spin stories into living dreams. Some called her foolish, wandering without protection, yet she believed stories could carry more power than steel. Still, even she felt unease pressing against her chest. What curse could silence an entire people? Her question was almost answered too quickly. A man stepped out from the shadows near a cracked fountain. His cloak was torn, his jaw sharp with unshaved stubble, and a scar ran from his cheekbone to his chin. His eyes narrowed, guarded, fixed on Elara. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His voice was hoarse, as though unused for weeks. Elara squared her shoulders. "Neither should silence." "But it lingers, doesn't it?" His eyes flashed, with something fear, or perhaps sorrow. "My name is Kael. If you value your life, leave before they notice you." "They?" Elara asked. Kael's gaze shifted nervously to the rooftops, as if shadows themselves listened. He said nothing more before Elara could press him. A tug at her sleeve made her look down. A child stood beside her, no more than 8 years old. Her dark curls framed wide, shining eyes, but her lips never parted. Instead, she held up a scrap of parchment, a hurried drawing in smudged charcoal. The sketch showed a towering figure cloaked in black, claws outstretched, a crowd bowing beneath it in silence. Elara crouched low, meeting the child's eyes. "And who is this?" "This is Lyra," Kael muttered. "She has never spoken a word. The curse binds her tighter than most, but she draws the truth." Lyra pressed the paper closer. Her small hand trembled. Elara's heart tightened. She wanted to tell a story right there, to fill the air with words strong enough to chase the silence away. But Kael's hand gripped her arm, firm and desperate. "Don't," he hissed. "If you speak, they will hear you. And once they do, they will hunt you until you are gone." "The shadows," Elara whispered. Kael's silence was answer enough. Lyra tugged again, showing a second sketch. This one was worn from use. A tall figure wearing a crown, mouth sewn shut with thick, black stitches. The crown glowed faintly, but the king's eyes were hollow. Elara's breath caught. "The king himself." Kael turned away, jaw tightening. "The silent king rules us, but he is no ruler. He is a prisoner," and for the first time, Elara felt it not just quiet, but a presence. The silence itself was watching her. She had wandered into a kingdom ruled by shadows, and she carried the one thing they feared most, a voice. Kael led Elara and Lyra through twisting alleys, moving like a man who knew which shadows to avoid. The air grew colder the deeper they went, and Elara noticed that the silence was thicker here, like a fog. Even the sound of her footsteps seemed swallowed before it reached the walls. "Where are you taking us?" she asked in a hushed voice. Kael shot her a sharp glare. "Don't speak unless you must. Words are fire here. They burn brighter than you think." Yet Elara couldn't help herself. "Fire can also light the way." Kael didn't reply, but the faintest flicker of respect crossed his scarred face. Finally, he ushered them into a crumbling house tucked between two towers. Inside, a dim lantern flickered, one of the few sources of light Elara had seen since entering the city. Dust coated the air, but here, at least, the silence felt less oppressive. Lyra darted to a corner, pulling out a hidden box of charcoal scraps and torn papers. She began sketching furiously, her small fingers smudging black streaks across her hands. Elara watched her for a moment before turning back to Kael. "Tell me what happened here." For a long moment, Kael said nothing. Then he sank into a chair, shoulders heavy, and exhaled as if the story itself weighed too much to speak. "Once," he began slowly, "our kingdom thrived. We were singers, storytellers, poets. Every street echoed with laughter, every hall with music. Even the king himself was a man of great voice. He told stories that healed wounds and ended wars. His crown was not gold, but song." Elara's chest tightened. She could almost hear the kingdom alive with words, filled with light. What changed? Kael's eyes hardened. They came. The shadows. They hate voices, hate stories, hate anything that sparks freedom. They struck at our greatest strength, our words. They took the king first, bound his mouth shut with threads of shadow. Without him, we fell quickly. Lyra crept closer, holding up another drawing. This one showed a great hall filled with hooded creatures, their faces hidden, their long fingers tugging threads across people's lips, sealing them shut. A silent scream stretched across the paper. Elara's stomach twisted. How many fell to the curse? Kael looked away. All of them, save for a few who learned to hide. Speaking is death. Only whispers remain, and even whispers are dangerous. Elara's mind spun. A kingdom built on song and story, smothered into silence. But deep within her, something rebelled. Stories are meant to live. Voices are meant to rise. Then why haven't you fought back? She asked. Kael's glare returned, sharper than before. Do you think we haven't tried? We lost everything when we did. The shadows are endless. They feed on courage as easily as fear. You, outsider, you cannot understand. His bitterness stuck, but Elara stood firm. Perhaps, but I have something you don't, a story yet untold, and stories can change the world for a heartbeat. Silence pressed harder, as if it had heard her defiance. The lantern flame sputtered. Lyra's eyes widened in fear. Kael's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Enough, you draw them here. But before Elara could answer, Lyra tugged at her sleeve, thrusting another drawing into her hands. This one was different. It wasn't of the shadows. It was of a book, a great tome, bound in silver, its pages glowing with light. Beneath the sketch, Lyra had scrawled one word, shakily but clear. Voice. Elara's breath caught. A book of voices? Could such a thing exist? Kael saw the drawing and paled. His lips moved, but no sound came for a moment. When he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. The book of voices. It's a myth. A fairy tale told to children before the silence came. They say it holds every story ever spoken, every song ever sung. If it's real, it could break the curse. Elara clutched the sketch. For the first time since stepping into this cursed kingdom, hope flickered in her chest. But outside the cracked window, the silence shifted. It wasn't emptiness anymore, it was listening. The crumbling lantern flame quivered as though it too feared the silence pressing against the walls. Elara clutched Lyra's drawing tighter, her eyes tracing the glowing book sketched in charcoal. If this book of voices is real, she whispered, then it's what we've been waiting for. A chance to fight back. Kael shook his head violently. You don't understand. Every time someone chased that story, they vanished. The shadows guard it, or perhaps they made it up to lure us into despair. Hope can be the cruelest trap, but Elara saw something Kael did not. Lyra's eyes bright, urgent, unyielding. A child did not draw with such certainty unless truth stirred inside her. Elara kneeled beside her, brushing a lock of dark hair from her face. Lyra, do you know where it is? The girl nodded once. Then, carefully, she drew again. Jagged cliffs, a broken tower, and beneath it, a cavern glowing faintly. Her hand trembled as she added the final detail, dark shapes crawling around the cave mouth. Kael cursed under his breath. The wailing. Caverns. No one goes there and lives. That's where the shadows nest. Elara's jaw tightened. His fist against the table, making the lantern sputter. You're mad. We won't survive an hour in those caves. Then we'll outsmart them. Elara shot back. Your people have hidden long enough. The shadows thrive on silence, so we'll give them something they don't expect. Kael stared at her, and for the first time, doubt cracked in his hardened expression. She was not like the others who had tried and failed. Her defiance burned too brightly. Outside, the silence stirred again, heavier than before. A distant scraping sound echoed faintly, as though claws dragged along stone. Kael's hand went instinctively to the hilt of a rusted blade at his side. They've heard us. We need to move. Now. They fled the ruined house and slipped into the darkened streets. The kingdom loomed like a corpse of stone and shadow. Towers bent like broken teeth, and empty windows stared down at them like hollow eyes. Elara felt it then. The silence wasn't just absence. It watched. Every step they took sent ripples through the stillness, as though unseen ears listened from every wall. Stay close, Kael murmured, but Lyra tugged at Elara's sleeve again, holding up a new drawing she had scratched quickly. On the move, this one showed a winding path through ruined gardens, under a broken bridge, past a shattered gate. At the end of it, the cavern. Elara met the child's gaze and nodded. Somehow, Lyra knew the way, the journey through the ruins. Tested them. Twice, shapes moved in the mist hall. Cloaked figures with hands too long and faces hidden. They drifted across the streets, searching. Each time, Elara and Kael froze, hearts pounding, while Lyra squeezed Elara's hand with fierce, silent trust. Finally, after hours of creeping through deathly silence, they reached the cliffs. There, the air grew colder still, and the ground trembled with a faint hum that vibrated through their bones. Below the jagged rocks yawned the mouth of the cavern. Darkness poured within, deeper than night. Yet somewhere inside, faint and impossible, came a sound, a thread of music, a whisper of voices long lost. Elara's breath caught. "It's real," she murmured. "The book is real." Kael's eyes widened in disbelief. For a moment, wonder cracked his despair. But then the hum deepened, and from the cavern mouth, the shadows stirred. Dozens of them, their cloaks unfurling like wings of smoke, their faceless heads turning toward the intruders. Lyra clutched Elara's arm, and for the first time, sound broke from her lips, a tiny gasp. The shadows heard. The cavern's mouth yawned wide like a wound in the cliffs. The ground trembled faintly, a pulse of dread that seemed to come from the darkness itself. The shadows gathered at the threshold, their bodies twisting smoke and bone, faceless heads tilting as though savoring the fear bleeding from their prey. Kael's blade rasped free of its sheath, a pitiful scrap of rusted steel against such creatures. "We're not ready for this," he whispered, but Elara stood firm, her heart hammering. "Hope doesn't wait for readiness, Kael. It demands courage. Stay close to Lyra, I'll draw them off." Before Kael could protest, she stepped forward, lantern held high. The weak flame flared, flickering in the unseen wind that poured from the cavern. For a moment, the shadows recoiled, as though the tiny spark offended their silence. Then, with a collective hiss like stone grinding on stone, they surged forward. Elara darted toward the cliffs, swinging the lantern in wide arcs. The shadows followed, drawn to motion, to defiance. Kael seized Lyra's hand and dragged her into the cavern's mouth. Inside, the air was thick, humming with a strange vibration that seemed to echo in their chests. The walls were carved with ancient markings, sigils of stars and circles, etched by hands long dead. Faint lines of light pulsed between them, guiding deeper into the earth. Lyra, small but unafraid, tugged Kael along. She seemed to know the path, as though the very stones whispered directions only she could hear. Behind them, Elara sprinted along the cliff edge, the shadows slashing at her with tendrils of black mist. She ducked, rolled, and flung the lantern. Into their midst, the flame exploded in a brief, brilliant flare, scattering them like startled crows. She dove into the cavern just as the last light died. Darkness slamming shut behind her like a door. "Keep moving," she panted, catching up with Kael and Lyra. The tunnels twisted downward, echoing with their hurried footsteps. And then, faint but unmistakable, they heard its voices. Not words, but a chorus, distant and resonant, vibrating through stone and bone alike. The book. Elara breathed, but the deeper they went, the stranger the silence grew. Not empty this time, watchful. The shadows had not abandoned the chase. They had slithered into the very rock, moving unseen along the edges of the dark dot. At last, they reached a vast chamber. Stalactites dripped like teeth, and at its center stood a pedestal of black stone. Upon it rested a book that glowed faintly with silver light. Its pages whispered as though stirred by an invisible wind. The Book of Voices. Elara took a step forward, awe and terror mingling in her chest. But Lyra darted ahead, her small hand reaching toward it. "No, wait!" Kael shouted the moment her fingers brushed the cover. The cavern roared. The walls shuddered, the sigils blazing with light. From every shadow, the faceless creatures poured forth, shrieking soundlessly, but something else stirred to the book opened by itself. Pages turned in a blur, and a voice unlike any they had ever heard thundered into the chamber. "Who dares awaken the voices of the forgotten?" The shadows froze, and Lyra, her lips trembling, whispered her first true word in years. "Help!" The chamber quaked, dust cascading from the ceiling like rain. The glow of the book intensified until it burned brighter than any sun Elara had ever imagined. She shielded her eyes, but the brilliance poured through her fingers like water. Kael stumbled backward, dragging Lyra with him. But Lyra resisted, her small frame anchored to the pedestal as though invisible chains bound her to the book. The shadows screeched in silence, their faceless heads thrashing in torment as the voice from the book echoed again. Who dares awaken the voices of the forgotten?
Elara forced her eyes open. She stepped forward, heart hammering, and cried out, "We do. The kingdom is dying.
The shadows have stolen our voices, our hope, our lives.
We need you."
The pages of the book stilled. A new sound rippled through.
The cavern whispers, countless whispers, weaving together like threads in a tapestry. We remember. We remember the songs, the cries, the laughter, the betrayal. We remember what was stolen. Kael tightened his grip on his sword.
This doesn't feel like salvation, he muttered. The whispers rose to a storm.
Lyra, trembling but unafraid, reached out and placed her palm flat on the glowing page. The light surged through her body, lifting her into the air.
Her hair floated like fire, and her eyes blazed with silver. Then she spoke not one word, but 100 voices pouring from her throat, layers and harmonic. The shadows are the remnants of what was silenced. To defeat them, you must give what you most fear to lose. The shadows recoiled, writhing at the sound, their forms weakening like mist in sunlight. Elara's stomach clenched.
What we most fear to lose. She thought of her sister, her memories,
her own fragile hope. Kael snarled, stepping forward. Enough riddles. Tell us how to fight them. The book's voices thundered in response. Power without sacrifice corrupts.
Sacrifice without purpose destroys.
Choose wisely, your kingdom's fate rests upon your choice. Suddenly, the cavern split with a thunderous crack.
A chasm opened at their feet, swallowing stalagmites whole.
From the darkness within, the
largest shadow yet emerged, its body towering, arms stretching like wings across the chamber, its faceless head bent low, and a silence so deep it crushed the very breath from their lungs swept over them. The Whisper King. The shadows bowed in
reverence to their master. Elara gripped Lyra's hand, pulling her free from the book's glow.
But the child looked at her with those strange, silver-lit eyes and whispered, "We cannot run."
The voices chose us. The Whisper King raised an arm.
The silence deepened, pressing against their ears until blood trickled from keels, and in
that crushing moment, Elara realized, to fight this silence, she would have to give up the one thing she held most.
And shadow, it became a throne room of silence. Every sound Elara tried to make was swallowed before it left her lips. Even her heartbeat felt muted, smothered. The Whisper King towered above them, his form shifting like smoke caught in an endless storm.
His faceless head tilted, as though studying his prey. Then, in a voice that was both absence and weight, he spoke. You would challenge silence itself, then speak what you would sacrifice. Elara's knees weakened.
Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Kael staggered forward, blood still trailing from his ears.
His defiance burned, even as silence threatened to crush him.
He raised his sword, but the blade trembled in his grip. "I will not bow to shadows," he roared.
Yet even his shout dissolved into nothingness, erased before it could echo. The Whisper King stretched out a vast arm.
Kael's sword shattered into dust. The Book of Voices glowed faintly, as if resisting the king's suffocating power.
Lyra clutched its cover, her small frame shaking.
But her silver-lit eyes blazed with strange calm. "The choice is not his," she said, her words carrying power the king could not silence.
The voices demand a sacrifice.
Elara must decide. Elara's chest tightened. Why me? She wanted to scream. Why always me?
But deep down, she knew why.
She was the one who had carried hope when others had surrendered. She was the one who
still dreamed of a kingdom reborn. The Whisper King leaned close, his presence pressing like a mountain upon her spirit. What do you fear to lose most, child of sound? Images rushed through Elara's mind, her mother's lullabies, long forgotten in silence. Her friends, voices stolen, faces fading into shadow. Her sister, now just a memory. She whispered hoarsely, "My memories. The king's faceless."
Head turned, as if intrigued. "If you give them," the voices within Lyra intoned, "you may wield the song that shatters silence."
But once gone, you will never again know who you were, or who you fought for. Elara's hand shook violently.
Her memories were all she had left, the fragments of laughter, the warmth of a family that once was, the reason she had survived. Without them, who would she be?
Kael grabbed her shoulder, eyes burning. Don't. There has to be another way. You'll lose yourself. The Whisper King's massive arms spread wide, silence crashing like waves.
Choose, he thundered. Elara closed her eyes. The book pulsed in her hand, waiting. Lyra's tiny fingers slipped into hers, grounding her, and with trembling lips, Elara whispered, though she knew it would cost her everything, "I will give my memories." The book of voices erupted in blinding light. The Whisper King reeled
back. For the first time faltering, light burst outward from the book, flooding the cavern with brilliance.
The Whisper King recoiled, his shadowy form thrashing like a wounded beast. Elara screamed as the light poured into her, threads of memory tearing free from her soul, her mother's face, her sister's laughter, Kael's smile. Each one slipped
away like sand between her fingers, leaving her hollow. But in that hollow space, a sound began to grow dougherty first. It was a single note, thin, fragile, like the cry of a child. Then it swelled, layering into a harmony, a chorus that was both hers and not hers.
The song of sacrifice. Her lips moved, and though she remembered nothing, her voice carried every forgotten memory of the kingdom. It rose higher and higher until
even the stalactites trembled. Kael fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face.
Elara, he whispered, though she no longer looked at him with recognition. The Whisper King staggered, his silence cracking like shattered glass under the force of her song. His faceless head split, revealing a maw of endless void. He screamed without sound, and for the first time, the silence itself was broken. The shadows writhed, unraveling into threads of smoke that dissolved in the golden light of her song. The chamber's sickles blazed with fire, resonating with her melody, but the cost was clear when the last note left her lips. Elara swayed, her eyes empty of recognition.
She looked at Kael as though he were a stranger. Who
are you? She asked softly. Kael's heart broke.
He grasped her hand, desperate to hold onto what little remained.
I'm someone who will remember for you, he said fiercely. Lyra's silver gaze softened.
The voices accept her sacrifice.
The Whisper King is wounded, but not destroyed.
His silence retreats, but it will rise again if the song is forgotten. Elara turned her face toward the cavern's fading glow, tears glistening though she did not know why, and far above, in the kingdom still cloaked in silence, the first faint sound of bells rang once more. The cavern shook as the Whisper King steadied himself, his wounded form writhing like smoke torn by storm winds.
Though diminished, his presence was still vast, still suffocating. You think one song can unmake silence?
His broken voice echoed.
I am the stillness between every heartbeat. I am eternal. Elara stood trembling, eyes empty of recognition, but the light of the book still glowed faintly at her side. Her memories were gone, yet her body remembered how to sing. She was the vessel now, the song itself lived through her. Kael gripped his broken hilt, his hands raw with blood. You may be eternal, he snarled, but so are we.
Humanity's voice will never die. Lyra raised her arms, the silver fire in her eyes blazing brighter than ever.
Then let all voices speak as one. The chamber filled with sound. Elara's song, Kael's cry, Lyra's chorus, and the faint whispers of every soul lost to silence.
It was no longer just one melody.
It was the voice of a kingdom reborn. The Whisper King writhed, splitting and unraveling as the sound pressed against him.
His massive frame cracked, shards of shadow falling like broken glass. With a final roar, Kael charged, wielding nothing but courage. He leapt into the air, striking the king's chest as Elara's final note pierced the cavern. The Whisper King shattered into dust.
Silence screamed, then collapsed into nothingness. The cavern stilled, and for the first time in centuries, true sound untouched, unbound, filled the kingdom above.
Bells rang, birds sang, and the voices of people returned like a flood. Elara collapsed to her knees, her song fading into quiet.
She looked around with wide eyes, blank but peaceful.
She had no name, no past, no memory of what had been.
But the kingdom lived. Kael knelt beside her, pressing his forehead to hers. His tears dripped onto the stone. Even if you never know me again, he whispered, I'll never stop remembering you. Lyra closed the book of voices, its glow dimming. The king is gone, but the lesson remains.
Sound is not just power, it is connection.
It is memory, and now it is life again. Outside, the kingdom awakened.
Children laughed, rivers roared,
and songs rose toward the heavens. Final lesson for viewers. And so, the silent kingdom was freed not by strength alone, but by sacrifice, by courage, and by the will to keep speaking when silence demanded surrender. Sometimes the greatest battles we fight are not against enemies, but against losing hope, and the voices we raise together are stronger than any shadow. Remember, your voice matters, and even in silence, it carries the power to change the world.